Here's the truth, good and bad, about the Miami Hurricanes college football playoff ranking.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Canes are moving on up in that CFP. I am Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this episode of Locked On Canes, we'll talk about the Miami Hurricanes' potential biggest transfer portal needs after the season. Not that I want to look that far ahead, but we've got some questions about it. What it's going to take to make a strong recruiting finish. Folks, we're 7 days away, 1 week away from early signing period. We'll talk about the keys against the Syracuse Orange, but let's talk about that college football playoff ranking because the Hurricanes have officially moved up 2 spots. They were number 8 last week. Miami beat Wake Forest. Strong fourth quarter gave the Hurricanes a separation, ultimately a blowout victory. You had more cannibalization within the SEC. So the Hurricanes move up from number 6 to number 8. From number 8 to number 6, I should say. You still have the Oregon Ducks unbeaten, ranked first, then a bunch of one-loss teams, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame round out the top 5, Miami at number 6. Then you've got a couple of 2-loss SEC teams, Georgia and Tennessee. SMU is now ranked number 9. They're improving their position. Indiana just suffered their first loss against Ohio State. They round out the top 10. Boise State and Clemson now at number 12, Alabama and Ole Miss just outside at 13, 14, South Carolina at 15. So that's what we're looking at now in the college football playoff rankings. But more importantly, everyone loves to talk about the brackets, right? The Hurricanes now, even though their ranking moved up 2 spots, the seeding does not change. They were considered to be the 3 seed last week. It's the same thing this week. And the reason why Miami's projected as the 3 seed, it's because they're the projected ACC champion. So obviously they still need to earn that on the field. But if they win the ACC, you're probably looking at a 3 seed, which means you get a first round bye and you would play your opening CFP game would be at the Peach Bowl. I think that's January 1st. In Atlanta, and I like the way that this current form of the bracket shakes out. Projected Miami to take on the Indiana versus Penn State winner, the 11 seed versus the 6 seed. Whichever one of those teams you face is a game Miami could theoretically win and could be the start of a pretty magical run. Although if you do win your first game, you're probably matching up with Oregon in the semifinals. And wow, storylines would be galore in that one. So that's where they currently have Miami in the CFP as projected as the 3 seed, taking on the winner of that Indiana versus Penn State game. But guys, when I talk about the truth about this ranking, now here's the good. Probably now Miami is in a strong enough position at number 6 where if the Hurricanes were to lose in the ACC championship game, not that any of us want that, but Miami's probably now in strong enough shape where if they were to lose, preferably a close loss, not a blowout loss, but if they were to lose in the ACC championship game, you're probably in a strong enough position with the committee where you could still sneak into the playoffs as an at-large. And I would say the same thing about SMU, right? That if SMU loses to Miami in the championship game, they could probably sneak in. Same thing true for Miami. That's the good. The bad is I know, I can look ahead. You guys watching this and listening to this can look ahead. Of course, Miami's players and coaches cannot afford to look ahead because the bad is you still have to beat Syracuse this weekend. You need that game. You need that win to punch your ticket to the ACC championship game because if you don't win this weekend, Clemson gets to the title game. And if Miami doesn't get to the ACC championship, even with a strong 10-2 regular season, you're very much on the bubble, right? That, hey, maybe theoretically, if there's enough cannibalization, you could still sneak in at 10-2 without an ACC championship win. more likely you're out in that scenario. So Miami has to beat Syracuse this weekend. They are favored to do so by double digits, but I am not calling this an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. So all bets are off. The good is Miami could potentially sneak into the playoff, even with an ACC championship loss. The bad is you've got to beat the team that's in front of you this weekend on the road in the Syracuse Orange. We're going to answer questions on this episode from the Locked On Canes insiders. Guys, I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day so close to Thanksgiving. If your relatives want to spend time with you today, why don't you spend time together in front of your screen watching Locked On Canes or listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We appreciate you guys being here. We appreciate the Locked On Canes insiders. We get this question from John in Tampa who says, hey, obviously Saturday's a must win, or, we don't make the ACC championship game. No matter the circumstance, I cannot see us making the playoffs in that situation, even after all the SEC teams losing last week. He says Syracuse is able to punch above their weight class, especially at home. Syracuse, by the way, is 5-1 at home this year. The Dome is a tough place to play, although when you're playing a game late November in Syracuse, New York, I'd much rather play inside a dome than outside if they had an outdoor venue. So I think the alternative is better there. He says, hey, what are the keys to the game that Miami must execute in order to win this weekend and make the ACC championship? Well, first of all, I think Miami needs to control the clock, because Syracuse has a top 2 passing offense in the entire country. They've actually, just in passing offense, they've recently passed Miami. So it's now Ole Miss has the most passing yards per game. Syracuse is number 2. Miami's at number 3. So Kyle McCord has a lot of weapons to throw the football to, including Aranda Gadsden II, the dynamic tight end, hybrid tight end, who's their leading receiver this year. So I think Miami needs to control the clock. And Hurricanes, unlike Syracuse, Miami has a pick your poison offense. Syracuse's running game has not been that much of a factor this year, although LaQuint Allen is a very good back. They don't have depth in their running back room, where Miami does, right? When you have the opportunity to really jam it down their throats with Damian Martinez, Mark Fletcher, and Jordan Lyle, my God, he's earned himself more playing time. I would think, 16 yards per carry last week, 115 yards and a touchdown. So I think Miami really needs to emphasize the running game in this one. And obviously you're going to need to make plays. And guess what? If you emphasize the running game, that's going to make Syracuse's defense honest, and it's going to open up more things down the field for Cam Ward, right? Where Ward is going to be able to find Jacoby George deep, who had a huge game, a very good game last week against Wake Forest. Xavier Restrepo, Mr. Consistency. I would like to see Miami get their tight ends even more involved, right? Because as good as Elijah Arroyo was last week, I wanted to throw the football to him even more. But I think clock control is the most important thing on offense. Also, winning the turnover margin, because that's an area Syracuse acknowledges that, and we're going to have Jackson Holzer on from Locked On Syracuse later this week. They really feel like they're going to have to be probably +2 in the turnover margin to beat Miami. So take care of the football. Defensively, try and communicate, right? Like they did last week. The communication, the alignment was a lot better. Your defensive backs, I really hope Damari Brown plays this week, because of course Syracuse is going to be a very, very pass-heavy offense. Miami, I believe if you can make and keep Syracuse one-dimensional, it's going to open up your pass rush, right? Kyle McCord has put up some huge numbers this year, but if Miami can, play with a lead, Syracuse is going to throw the football a ton. Hurricanes produced 5 sacks last week, which was a big-time bounce-back game for them. Pressuring Kyle McCord, for me, is the number one key on defense. And let's hope the way Miami played defense for the majority of the game last week against Wake Forest, where they only gave up 1 touchdown against a good Wake Forest offense. Syracuse's offense is better. Wake Forest's offense is not bad. Miami really played well defensively last week. Let's try to get more of that this week. So those are the primary keys that I'm looking at heading into this Syracuse game. We're going to answer more of you guys' questions. If you want to become a Locked On Canes insider, click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours and vice versa. We'll talk about Miami's 1-0 mentality. We'll talk about who you'd like to face in the playoff if Miami does get there. We'll talk about the tight end matchup because Aranda Gadsden the second versus Elijah Arroyo is going to be an awesome matchup. And we're certainly going to talk some recruiting because you guys have questions. We're a week before National Signing Day. Hopefully I have answers for you. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm only getting started with FanDuel. Miami 10.5-point favorites against Syracuse. If you like Miami to win and win big, you know where to go. You're going to go to America's #1 sports book. And guys, you can get ready to tackle all the NFL action with America's #1 sports book because right now on FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around all the big storylines in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Could the ACC end up getting 3 teams in the college football playoff? Because you can't completely rule out Clemson no matter what happens this weekend. Clemson could be in a position to sneak in as well. Miami and SMU hopefully both get in. So make sure you guys check out Locked On ACC. Like this show, it's available free wherever you get your podcasts, and it's available free on YouTube. All right, we get a question from our guy, ND Hater, Notre Dame Hater 85. By the way, I'm a little angry that Notre Dame is ranked in front of Miami when they lost to NIU. Like, Miami lost to Georgia Tech, not a good loss. Losing to Northern Illinois, that's a terrible loss, but it is what it is. He says, hey, I understand the let's go 1-0 this week message, and I get it, he says, but my question is, if Miami wins their next 2 games and gets a bye, who would you like them to face in the round of 8? At least and least like them to face. Honestly, who would I like Miami to face? Honestly, I think that the way the bracket is projected right now is really, really good, right? Because Indiana and Penn State, if you face the winner of that matchup, they both feel theoretically beatable. I'm not guaranteeing Miami wins that game, but those are 2 of the more beatable teams in the bracket. Arizona State is a team you'd like to match up with if possible, because I mean, a lot of these other teams, I would like to avoid. Certainly, teams like Georgia and Tennessee out of the SEC. Notre Dame, I know I say that they may not deserve to be ranked in front of Miami, but they've obviously they've turned a corner ever since that loss to NIU. SMU could be, a team that you could face. Like, it'd be weird to face them twice within like a 3-week period. I'd probably say the teams that I would like to face would be Indiana, Penn State, or Arizona State out of the teams that are currently projected to get into the CFP. We get this question from our guy BP, who says, hey, am I the only one that doesn't have a good feeling about the Syracuse game? He says, I know I can be a bit more negative than most. I guess, BP, you're a glass half empty guy. But I just don't see us even coming close to stopping their offense, BP says. Okay, well, a couple things there. In a lot of the games that Miami has played this year, not being able to stop the opponent's offense, they've still been able to win a lot of games not doing that. So you got to look at it that way, BP, because the flip side is also true. Syracuse's defense, which is 79th nationally, that's below average, their total defense. Their rushing defense is near dead last. I think it's 127th out of 133 teams. So if you think Miami's going to have a hard time stopping Syracuse's offense, Syracuse is looking at Miami like, how are we going to stop these guys? Because believe it or not, Miami's defense, despite looking so bad at times this year, they have the #1 defense Miami does in the ACC. Top defense. I don't know how that's even possible, but it's reality. So first of all, BP, if you ask how's Miami going to stop Syracuse's defense, how's Syracuse going to stop Miami's defense? Again, I don't necessarily know if it's who they are, but we saw a lot of positives from Miami's D last week. So try to continue some of that momentum. And then, as I said earlier, BP, if Syracuse plays one-dimensionally, it's going to give Miami's pass rush an opportunity, because Miami probably has the most talented pass rush that Syracuse has seen all season long. So, Ruben Bain looks like he's really returning to form based on the way he played last week. Miami's probably getting Elijah Alston back. Simeon Barrow has been really good throughout the year. So I feel pretty good about the opportunity Miami has to wreak some havoc on Syracuse's offense. So, I know you're a negative guy, but I hope I made you feel a little bit better about it. 818 Callie Kane asks, hey, which tight end is going to be the most impactful in this game? Elijah Arroyo from Miami or Aranda Gadsden from Syracuse? He says, as I believe that will be the key to the game, who has the most productive day, as both are huge matchup problems for both defenses. I mean, Aranda Gadsden gets more targets. He's a much like Miami's got a deeper receiver room. Even if Luther Campbell might feel differently, Miami has a deeper wide receiver room, tight ends included. So Aranda Gadsden he's going to be a more featured part of Syracuse's passing game than Arroyo will be in Miami. So for that reason, I'm going to say Gadsden is probably going to be more impactful, but I'll give you the old Lee Corso, not so fast, my friends, because we all know a couple things. We all know Elijah Arroyo is a mismatch problem, and I got a feeling, based on what Cam Ward said after the Wake Forest game, I think Ward is really going to make an effort to get Arroyo involved, because Ward noted that Arroyo is the only out of like Miami's big five receivers / tight ends. Arroyo's the only one who hasn't cracked 100 yards in a game so far this year. And Ward was the one who brought that up. So you kind of feel like Ward really wants to get Arroyo going in this game. So maybe I'm wrong, but just based on the evidence of what we've had throughout the year, where Aranda Gadsden is the most targeted receiver and most featured receiver in the Syracuse offense, where it's been, Restrepo as Miami's most and Elijah Arroyo's like fourth or fifth. Logic would tell you Gadsden is going to be the more impactful guy this week, but I don't know, man. If Cam Ward wants to make an effort to get Arroyo more involved, maybe Elijah Arroyo could end up being the answer in this one. I kind of already covered this, but we get an insider says, hey, our ACC offense is so advanced that our defenses seem weak. He says, we look bad, yet we have the number one defense in the ACC. It could be partially that, but it also could be the ACC is not that great of a defensive conference this year. I think that could be part of it as well. We get a question from our guy, Al Picon. By the way, Al, is your favorite Thanksgiving dessert, is it pecan pie? Is that that was so bad. I'll be here all week. That's the kind of joke my 6-year-old would have laughed at that, I think. Al says, hey, will the Hurricanes continue to try and pound the rock against Syracuse with Fletcher, Johnson, Lyle, and others to open up the passing attack? Yes, I think that absolutely has to be the emphasis, right? Because again, Miami, when you're going up against a dangerous, prolific passing offense like Syracuse's, I think you need to win the time of possession game. Miami has a more well-rounded offense than Syracuse does. It's why Miami has the number one total offense in the country. You definitely want to pound the running game, because like you said, not only could you have some success doing that, because Syracuse has not been good against the run this year, but then you're also going to open things up for your plethora of weapons down the field from Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, Isaiah Horton, who's having such a tremendous year, Sam Brown. I know Sam Brown's been very hot and cold, but when he's hot, he is hot. Elijah Arroyo and company. I'd like to see other tight ends get involved as well. I want to see, more opportunities catching passes for Riley Williams and for Elijah Lofton as well in the tight end room. So hopefully we get a number of these guys involved. All right, we'll answer more questions on the other side, because people have a lot of recruiting and transfer portal questions. I know that it's like, and you guys know historically, for those who have been with me for 2.5 years on Locked On Canes, we love to talk recruiting. But since we've had such a successful season on the field this year, we've been doing a little bit less recruiting, during the season than we usually do, because, Miami's got double-digit wins. We haven't had that for the last 2 years. However, we do have to talk some recruiting when we're a week away from National Signing Day. There's some positive signs out there for a couple of Miami's flip candidates. and the Loafers are going to be on the move. After this Syracuse game, win or lose, hopefully win, the Loafers are going to be making some in-home visits. We'll talk about it when we come back. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Hope everyone's having an awesome Thanksgiving week. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. I'm very thankful that Miami is a 10-win team and counting. You guys know for the past couple of seasons, we were with you all season long through 5-7 in 2022, 7-5, which was a little bit better, but not great last year. You know, I appreciate Miami giving us such a fun football team to talk about, and I appreciate all of you guys. I mean, helping us grow our community. You know, we recently hit or surpassed 18,000 YouTube subscribers. So I thank you guys so much for hitting that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for supporting the audio channels on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You know, if I wouldn't be doing the show without you guys, because listen, as much as I love talking Miami Hurricanes sports, if there was nobody listening and nobody watching, I'd probably find something else to do. So you guys make this show possible, and I really appreciate everyone for being a part of this community with us. And also for being a part of that Locked On Canes Insiders community. If you want to try it free, click that link in the show description below. Become a Locked On Canes Insider. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours. Try it free. If you like it, then after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We try to give you a lot of added value on there. We get this question from Bucks Canes in Evans, Georgia, who says, hey, I know the Loafers work in silence, but with National Signing Day being next week, where are the big fish, he says. This year's class, albeit currently ranked 10th, feels underwhelming compared to 2023, where we landed CC and Sampson, and 24 with Scott and Lightfoot. He says, by the way, during those classes, we address needs. He says, we need Pickett and Hanks Jr. Are the Loafers going to come through? He says, I feel like with a 10-1 record, we should be doing better with this class versus the previous two. You know, first of all, not to make any excuses, nor do I think too many excuses need to be made when Miami currently has, like you said, top 10 class right at this moment on 24/7 Sports, a top 7 class right now on Rivals. You know, I know that I feel like being 10-1 right now, that probably helps you more with 2026, because a lot of the 2025 guys had already made up their minds, and Miami already is really, really advanced when it comes to the 2026 recruiting trail. But I'm not trying to make excuses for this year because the class is already good, and Miami's not done yet, like you said. And yeah, the defensive backfield has been the biggest need to address. Like you mentioned, two cycles ago, multiple 5 stars in the offensive line, which you really needed. Multiple 5 stars in the defensive line last year, which you really needed. You really need blue chippers now in the defensive backfield. Miami's already got some really good ones. Jabari Antoine, Chris Ewald, Hilton Drake Stubbs, committed, are all 4-star, borderline 5. I think Stubbs has his 5th star already on Rivals, even if he doesn't have it on the other recruiting services. Timothy Merritt is super underrated. Now, I know Tennessee is really, really going after him hard, so hopefully Miami can keep Timothy Merritt locked into the class. Bryce Fitzgerald and Amari Wallace are really good players as well. But still, like, I agree with you. I would like to get one more blue chipper in the defensive backfield. I think the door is probably closing most of the way with Ben Hanks. I hope I'm wrong. But with Florida's resurgence and Billy Napier's job security, and Hanks made his visit last week to Florida, not to Miami. So they seem pretty solid with Hanks, but I think there's an opening, folks, with DJ Pickett. I really do. You know, I think that this one with Pickett, another week to go, because Pickett he's gonna shut it down on December 4th. That's when he's, you know, I guess we don't do national letters of intent anymore, but he's gonna, you know, sign his financial aid papers wherever he decides to go next week. So it's either going to be LSU or Miami. He's currently verbally committed to LSU. Even the LSU recruiting writers they're starting to get a little bit concerned with their recent lack of success on the field, and they view Miami as a threat here. So I think the DJ Pickett battle, it's going to go down a lot in the way that the Jeremiah Smith battle went last year between Ohio State and Miami. I just hope Miami wins it this time around. But there definitely is an opening. I truly believe this. There is an opening with DJ Pickett, and he's going to have a lot to think about, right? Miami's having the type of success on the field that Pickett wanted to see before the season started. Because you remember, Pickett's family before the season said they want to see Miami win. Miami has been winning. LSU, not so much, right? He's got the family ties to Miami with his uncle, Booker Sr., having played here, his cousin, Booker Pickett Jr., currently on the team, his younger cousin, Cannon Pickett, 2026 offensive lineman, really likes Miami. So I think this one's going to come down to the wire, folks. I think this is going to be just buckle up, because, if you follow all the recruiting message boards and the so-called experts, when we roll around to December 4th, which is a week from today, you're going to see the back and forth posts. Is it Miami? Is it LSU? So I think Miami has a real shot for DJ Pickett. And also, talking about flips, another defensive guy, I think Miami is in a pretty good position to flip TJ Alford, 4-star linebacker from Ohio State. So, if Miami can get both of those things done and also not, lose much of what you have, because other schools are going to try to flip some of the players we currently have committed, I think Miami can position themselves for a really strong finish. And, I don't know if a top 5 class is in the cards, but I think they could end up finishing like a strong 5th, 6th, or 7th, something like that is the way I look at it. So again, you mentioned the loafers. The loafers work in silence. You're going to have a lot of in-home visits coming up after the Syracuse game. So let's be patient. Let's let this play out. We get this question from Gil, who says, hey, what positions do you think the Canes will pursue in the transfer portal? He says, I think 2 of them will be running back and corners that can play the nickel. I don't know. With running back, I'm not so sure, because you're going to have, your dynamic duo next year is going to be Mark Fletcher, who's still, he's still going to be around. Damian Martinez will probably enter the NFL draft, I would think. He still has another year of eligibility if he chooses to use it, but let's assume Martinez goes pro. Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, that's a pretty darn dynamic 1-2 punch. Gerard Pringle coming in, who I think can have an impact as a true freshman, the way Lyle is doing this year. Hopefully, I don't know who's staying and who's leaving, obviously, but hopefully Chris Johnson and Chris Wheatley Humphrey are both here as well next year. I think you got a really strong running back room. So I don't know. I don't know if will you bring in a guy? Maybe, but I don't think that it's not as big of a need as it was with needing to bring in Martinez last year. Because remember, last offseason, we didn't know how healthy Fletcher was going to be, and we lost Henry Parrish. So it was a big need last year. Doesn't seem to be nearly as big of a need this year. I definitely think Miami's going to look at defensive backs in the portal, no question. I think Miami's going to look at receivers in the portal, because there's some young guys who we're really excited about. I know, Luther Campbell's very excited about some of the younger guys who don't play as much. But, Miami is going to be, you're losing Restrepo, you're losing Jacoby George and Sam Brown. You're going to be losing Elijah Arroyo from the tight end room, because he's going to be one of the top projected tight ends in the draft. So I think Miami's going to definitely look at receivers in the portal. Now I'm excited about, more playing time next year for guys like JoJo Trader, Nikar, Chance Robinson, Ray Joseph. I want to see certainly Isaiah Horton, who's going to be back next year. He's lining up probably to be the featured receiver. I could see maybe Miami going after another slot guy and a big body guy for the outside. So I could see receiver as well. Those are some of the positions. And also, a lot of people say it, quarterback, right? I mean, people seem to think Miami's maybe going to go out and try to find another guy who can hopefully have a Cam Ward type of impact. And Ward is one of one, believe me, but maybe Miami goes out and looks for quarterbacks as well. We get this one from Mike in the state of Miami. Says Greg McElroy did a podcast after the rankings show. He said he wanted to get ahead of it. I didn't hear this podcast, by the way, so I take your word for it. He said he wanted to get ahead of it as he believes the loser of the ACC title game will get jumped by Alabama, SEC 3-loss team, because of strength of schedule. I'm curious to your thoughts. He said, my thoughts, Bama has a top 12 roster, no doubt. If anyone can watch the OU game, though, and think they're one of the top 12 best teams, and I agree with you. I mean, that was an awful offensive performance, and OU is not good. He says they have a great roster. Yes, they played really well a few weeks, but they're not a top team this year, Mike says. We'll see if the committee is full of BS, right? Because the committee has repeatedly said they don't want to over penalize teams that lose in a conference championship game. So, if they were to keep the loser of the ACC championship game out in favor of 3-loss SEC teams, then they're full of BS. So we'll find out. But I still think even the loser of the ACC championship game, assuming it's not a blowout. If it's a close game, I think the loser definitely gets in. If it's a blowout, maybe they get penalized for style points and all that stuff. All right, guys, I want to send a huge thank you, and I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving coming up. If you want to send me pictures of what you're eating, if you want to, what was it? Mario Cristobal said his favorite Thanksgiving dish is picadillo, which I'm all Cuban Thanksgiving is epic. We do an Italian style Thanksgiving at my house. My father's from Italy. Italian Thanksgiving, there's going to be some roast pork. There's going to be some lasagna involved. Cuban Thanksgiving, lechon, picadillo, whatever you have going on. I hope everyone has an awesome meal, a great spread, a great Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you again later this week. We're not done for the week because we're going to have a crossover episode with Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse. So we will talk to you then on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.